there's been a fair representation.
Okay, she's not talking about anything that happened in the courtroom there. Even if you think I'm lying, even if you think I'm lying, even if you think I fucking went into a courtroom and took an oath and then lied, it's not fair to call me all these names on social media. What about inside the courtroom? She's only talking about social media here.
That verdict came less than 2 years after a judge ruled against Depp in a similar case in the UK, in which he sued a British newspaper that called him a wife beater.
There was another trial, dealt with the same substantive issues that had even more evidence in. In fact, my evidence was largely kept out. Really important pieces of evidence kept out. Done differently, handled differently by a judge instead of a jury.
Here's the thing. Totally different cases. Different laws, different standards of proof, different courts, different fact finders. So it's not analogous whatsoever. And what evidence does she have that was suppressed? I mean, there was a lot of evidence. I watched a big chunk of this trial. And this judge let in a whole bunch of shit that I wouldn't have let in if I was the judge, on both sides. So I think the judge was pretty liberal on what she let in and what she didn't let in.
Some evidence is admissible in a UK court that is not admissible in a US court. Do you think that maybe he just had better lawyers?
I will say his lawyers did certainly a better job of distracting the jury from the real issues.
Distracting the juries from what? The fact that I'm a liar? I mean, what Johnny Depp's lawyers did, she threw a softball up there and they hit it out of the fucking park. And they hit it out of the park with facts, with witnesses that were absolutely contradictory to, and she had no answer for those witnesses. So, like, you've got the park, the trailer park manager, completely contradicted her testimony, and she had nobody else to only herself. So that's really what the distraction was. The distraction was, I got my ass kicked.
Some people, they just were frankly disgusted by the whole thing and don't have much sympathy for either one of you. Can you understand that?
Absolutely. I would not blame the average person for looking at this and how it's been covered and not think that it is Hollywood brats at their worst.
Here's the thing. What was remarkable for me in this trial, and I think for a lot of people, was not the mountain of evidence, the lack thereof. Her claims did not have anything to back it up. I broke my nose. Okay, where's the evidence of you breaking your nose? No medical evidence. And you know what? I broke my nose. I got 2 black eyes, and I had to have my nose packed. Bullshit. She never broke her fucking nose. Then you've got the bruising. 6 days later, there's no contemporaneous pictures of any of the stuff she's talking about. But they've got Johnny Depp, passed out, with shit on him. They've got Johnny Depp laying on the floor. I mean, all these embarrassing things about Johnny Depp, but nothing about, that where she says the actual assaults happened. That's a problem for her.
But what people don't understand is it's actually so much bigger than that.
If you look at the lighting, This is at 4:29, okay? She almost looks on the right side like she's got a bruise on her cheek. And it's not a bruise. It's just shading from the lighting. But she's gorgeous. I mean, she's really a pretty girl. And you would think, and her nose looks exactly the same as it did when she was on the James Corden show.
This is not only about our First Amendment right to speak.
But here's the thing about the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects free speech. It doesn't protect lies that amount to defamation.
Here's the other thing about that. That's a very good point. You have freedom of speech. You don't have freedom of all speech. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater, right? Can you do that? No, you cannot. You can't call and make a prank phone call to the cops and have it not be a crime. You can't say whatever you want to say whenever you want to say it. Here's the other thing. The First Amendment only applies to government. Okay? So if I'm making a First Amendment claim, it only applies if the government's trying to restrict my speech. It doesn't apply to private actors.
And that was the issue in the case.
Yes, exactly. You can't go into, free speech does not protect you if you go into a crowded theater and you scream fire. We get the concept of free speech from the Greeks. My understanding of what that means is not just the freedom to speak. It's a freedom to speak truth to power.
But truth is the word.
Yes.
And that was the issue.
And that's all I spoke. And I spoke it to power, and I paid the price.
In the closing arguments, the Depp lawyer called your testimony the performance of a lifetime and said you were acting. What do you say to that?
Says the lawyer for the man who convinced the world he had scissors for fingers.
Really? Because he played Edward Scissorhands? Are you really fucking saying that? That makes no sense. But you remember when the acting, and I reacted to this, she had no tears. She pretended like she was crying, and she had no tears. Zero. That made no see that awkward silence. That made no sense.
A performer. I had listened to weeks of testimony, insinuating that, or saying quite directly that, I'm a terrible actress. So I'm a bit confused how I could be both.
The Depp team argued that you were the abuser, that you instigated physical violence. Did you?
I never had to instigate it. I responded to it. When you're living in violence and it becomes normal, as I testified to, you have to adapt.
You say you were...
Okay, let's say I'm Amber Heard's lawyer at this point. I would advise her not to do this, because guess what? She already got found liable for defamation. This is no longer a court of law. This is no longer anything. This is her now rehashing the abuse allegations, and she could really open herself up to another lawsuit. She really could.
Responding, but there is evidence. There are tapes in which you acknowledge hitting. There are tapes in which you say, I started the fight.
I know much has been made of these audio tapes.
I know much has been made of the evidence in this case. Are you really going to pay attention to the evidence? Just listen to me, because I just stepped on a bee, and now I have to pee. Give me a break.
First leaked online after being edited. What you would hear in those clips are not evidence of what was happening. It was evidence of a negotiation of how to talk about that.
Here's the thing. Then, if that was the case, why didn't her fucking lawyers bring out the entire thing? There's a rule of evidence called the rule of completion. I think it's 104. And what it means is you can, if somebody brings in part of a recording and it really doesn't tell the whole story, you can bring in the rest of the recording. And so you can tell the whole story. Did you tell the whole story? Don't think you did.
With your abuser.
But I am looking at a transcript that he says, you start physical fights, and you say, I did start a physical fight. I can't promise you I won't get physical again. I mean, this is...
There you go again, relying on the evidence. Why are you relying on the evidence when I just stepped on a bee?
In black and white. I understand context. But you're testifying and you're just telling me today, I never started a physical fight, and here you are on tape saying you did.
As I testified on the stand about this, is that when your life is at risk, not only will you take the blame for things that you shouldn't take the blame for, but when you're in an abusive dynamic, psychologically, emotionally, and physically, you don't have the resources that, say, you or I do with the luxury of saying, hey, this is black and white, because it's anything but when you're living in it.
But
you're a fucking baby, Johnny. I'll grow the fuck up, Johnny. Give me a break. That's what she said. That's what she said on tape. Or not on tape, on a recording. because everything's digital now.
Are you aged 40?